I came home from a 12-hour shift on a Tuesday, and found my younger sister in my bed with my fiancée. I'm not going to dress that up. I'm not going to ease into it or give you some cinematic lead-up about how the drive home felt, or what song was on the radio. That's what happened. I opened the door to my own apartment, dropped my keys on the counter the way I have every single day for 3s, and walked down the hall, because I could hear voices. I thought my fiancée was on the phone. I pushed the bedroom door open. They didn't hear me come in. I stood there for probably 4 or 5 seconds. Long enough that it wasn't confusion anymore. Long enough that my brain fully processed what I was seeing and filed it somewhere it's never going to let go of. My younger sister, my fiancée, my bed. I closed the door, walked back to the kitchen, picked my keys back up off the counter, sat down on the floor with my back against the kitchen island because my legs just stopped working. And I stared at the tile grout for what felt like a long time. I didn't yell, I didn't throw anything. I didn't go back down the hall. I don't know why. I think some part of me understood that if I went back in there, I was going to say or do something that I couldn't undo. And even in that moment, even completely gutted, I didn't want to be the version of myself that loses control in front of 2 people who had already taken so much from me. So I sat on the kitchen floor, and I waited. My fiancée found me there. She came out about 10 minutes later wearing my hoodie, and she stopped in the kitchen doorway and just looked at me. For a second her face did something complicated. Then, she said, "I can explain." I said, "Where is she?" She said my sister had gone out the window onto the fire escape, which I mean, sure. That tracks. Her name is Neve. My fiancée's name. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months. She's a dental hygienist, she grew up in Guelph, she has a laugh that carries across a whole restaurant. I loved her in the way where it's not even something you think about anymore, it's just a fact of your life, like your own address or what your coffee order is. You stop noticing it until it's gone. My sister is 5 years younger than me. I'm 31, she was 26 when this happened. Her name is, it doesn't matter. I've stopped saying her name. In my head I've replaced it with nothing. Like a gap in a sentence where a word used to be. She and Neve had met at my cousin's wedding 2 years before. I remember thinking they'd gotten along well. I remember being glad about it, actually. Glad my fiancé and my sister liked each other. I thought that was a good thing. I asked Neve how long. She looked at the floor. Said, 8 months. 8 months. I did the math standing in my own kitchen. 8 months meant it started approximately the same month I proposed. Which meant that the ring, the dinner, the whole thing. She'd already been in it by then. She'd said yes while she was already in it. I asked her one more question. I said, "Did anyone in my family know?" She didn't answer fast enough, and that was my answer. I left that night. Went to a hotel. I'm from Hamilton, Ontario, so I drove to the Sheraton on King Street and I sat in a room that smelled like cleaning products, and I called my best friend and told him what happened. He showed up 2 hours later with Tim Hortons, and didn't say much, just sat with me, which is exactly what I needed, and exactly what you hope someone does for you when your life falls apart. The next morning I called my mother. What I expected, shock, devastation, something along the lines of your daughter did what? What I got, honey, I think you need to hear both sides of this before you make any decisions. I genuinely did not know what to say. I sat in that hotel room and I looked at the wall and I said, both sides? Your sister is going through something, she's been struggling. I think if you could just. I hung up. I called my dad. He was calmer about it, more measured, but what he said amounted to the same thing. Don't be rash, think about the family. These things are complicated. As if the complication was on my end. As if I was the one making it messy. My aunt called me the next day, then my uncle, then my mother again. They all had slightly different scripts but the same message. Neve and my sister had made a mistake. They were sorry. The family needed me to think about what it would mean to blow everything up over this. My cousin. The one whose wedding introduced them, texted me to say she hoped I could find Grace. Grace. I've thought about that word a lot since then. Who was I supposed to be finding Grace for? Exactly? I blocked my sister's number the night I found out, and I've never unblocked it. I blocked my mother a week later, after a phone call where she cried for 20 minutes about how my sister was fragile. And I needed to protect her. I changed my number 2 weeks after that, told nobody in my family the new one, and ended my engagement. Neve didn't fight it. She cried a lot. She called it a mistake several times. I remember one specific phone call where she said the word mistake and I said, "Do you know how many separate decisions went into what you did? You decided to start it. You decided to keep it going. You decided to keep saying yes every time you could have said no for 8 months. Which part was the accident?" She didn't have a good answer. I gave her 60 days to get out of the apartment, which was mine, and I moved back in once she was gone. I scrubbed the whole place down. Got new sheets. Got a new mattress. I've since moved to a different apartment entirely, because the layout of that hallway still lives in my body. In a way I can't explain, but at the time I needed to stay, and I needed to make it feel like mine again. Work helped. I'm an electrician, journeyman ticket, and the kind of job where you're busy from the second you get there is exactly what I needed. I had guys on my crew who knew something was up and who, in the way that construction workers show care, just worked hard alongside me and didn't ask questions. One of them brought me a sandwich one day for no reason. I don't think he even knew what had happened. He just brought me a sandwich. I almost cried about the sandwich. The months that followed were quiet in a way I hadn't expected. I'm a pretty social person. I have friends, I have routines. But I'd lost the family structure that underlies everything, you know? The Sunday dinners, the group texts, the whole scaffolding of a life that you don't notice until it's not there. My mother's birthday came and went, and I didn't call. My dad texted me once and I didn't respond. My sister reached out through a cousin and I told the cousin not to do that again. I wasn't angry all the time. That surprised me. Some days I was sad. Some days I went for a run along the waterfront and I felt almost fine. I joined a hockey league because I'd stopped playing years ago, and I'd been meaning to get back into it, and somewhere in the months of skating twice a week, I started recognizing something that took me a while to name. It was relief. Not about losing Neve, not exactly. But about not being the person being lied to anymore without knowing it. The lying was the part I kept coming back to. Not just Neve and my sister lying to me. The whole family knowing or suspecting and saying nothing. Letting me walk around being the person who didn't know. That felt like its own separate thing. A different betrayal with more people attached to it. I went no contact in March. By September I had stopped flinching every time my phone rang. Then November, I was making dinner on a Thursday evening. Just pasta, nothing special, listening to a hockey game on in the background, and there was a knock at my door. Not a buzz from downstairs, an actual knock, which meant someone had gotten into the building. I looked through the peephole. Neve was standing in the hall. She was wearing a winter coat I didn't recognize. Her hair looked different, and she was visibly, unmistakably pregnant. I stood at the door for a long moment. I'm not sure what I was deciding, exactly. I think I was deciding whether I was going to be someone who could have a conversation through a door, or whether I needed to call someone first. Eventually I opened it. She looked at me and she said, "I need to talk to you." I said, "I can see that." She came inside, which in retrospect I don't know why I let happen, but she did. She sat down at my kitchen table and I sat across from her, and I didn't offer her anything because this wasn't that kind of visit, and we both knew it. She told me she was 7 months along. She told me the father was someone she'd met after we broke up, some guy from her gym. She told me it wasn't my sister's. She and my sister had ended things, apparently, which she said in a way that suggested she expected me to feel something about that. Some satisfaction or relief. And I honest felt nothing. Then she said the reason she'd come. She'd done a prenatal paternity test. She needed to rule out any question of whether the baby could be mine. Even though we'd been broken up for over 8 months by then, the timeline barely worked, she just needed to be sure it wasn't mine. She knew that. Set but. She wanted me to know she'd checked. I said, "Why are you telling me this?" She said, "Because I owe you the truth about something." Pause. She looked at the table. "Your mother called me. About 2 months after you went no contact. She asked me if I would reach out to you. She said the family was worried about you being alone for the holidays and she thought if I apologized properly, you might be willing to come back to everyone." I said, "She called you. She called me and asked me to be the reason you'd come back. After everything." I've thought a lot about what to feel about that. My mother called the woman who'd been sleeping with my sister for 8 months and asked her to act as an olive branch. Not an apology. Not accountability. Just a mechanism to get me back at the table so everyone could go back to pretending Christmas was fine. I told Neve I appreciated her telling me. I didn't mean it warmly, I meant it literally, the way you'd acknowledge information. Then I said, "You should go." She did. She stood up, buttoned her coat, and paused at the door. She said, "I really am sorry. I know it doesn't matter." I said, "Not really, no." After she left I stood at the window and watched the street for a while. There was snow coming down in that slow heavy way it does in November. In this part of the country where it means business. I thought about calling my friend but I didn't. I just stood there. I thought about my mother picking up the phone and dialing Neve's number. Thinking that was the move. Thinking that's what you do. I thought about all the ways people build structures to protect themselves from having to say the actual things. Masses. And I thought about how I'd spent 31 years inside one of those structures and how strange it was to be standing outside it now. My dad reached out a couple of months after that. Not through anyone, directly. He'd gotten my new number from somewhere. I still don't know how. He texted to say he'd like to have coffee. That he understood if I said no. That he wanted me to know he was sorry for how he'd handled things at the beginning. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I said yes. We met at a diner in Stony Creek on a Saturday morning. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth with a coffee, and he looked older than I remembered. That sounds like a dramatic thing to say, but it's not meant to be. He just looked like someone who'd been carrying something. We talked for 2 hours. He told me he hadn't known beforehand about Neve and my sister. He'd found out the same week I did, from my mother. He said he'd told my mother that the family needed to be on my side and she hadn't agreed. And that had caused its own problems between them. He wasn't asking me to feel bad for him. He was just telling me what had happened. He said my sister had eventually told the whole truth to the extended family, sometime around the summer. That some of the relatives who'd pushed me to find Grace had gone quiet afterward. That the cousin who'd texted me that word hadn't reached out to my sister since. I asked about my mother. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She loves you. She doesn't know how to hold two hard things at once. She picks one and she pushes." I'd say anything. "I'm not defending it," he said. "I'm just telling you how I understand it." I nodded. We finished our coffee. He paid the bill without making it a thing. Outside in the parking lot he hugged me and I let him. And I'll be honest, it knocked something loose in my chest that I hadn't realized was still jammed in there. I didn't cry. But it was close. I've seen my dad a few times since. We're careful with each other in a way we weren't before, which is its own kind of sad, but it's real. I take the real over the performance at this point. My mother sent me a letter in the spring. An actual letter, handwritten, mailed to my apartment. I don't know how she got my address. I read it standing at my kitchen counter. She said she was sorry. She said she'd made choices in how she said that she regretted. She said she understood if I didn't want to see her. She didn't ask me to come back to anything. She didn't mention my sister. She just said she was sorry and she missed me. I've read that letter 4 or 5 times. I haven't written back. I don't know what I want to do with it yet. That's an honest answer. My sister has never contacted me directly. Not once. I've heard through my dad that she's doing okay, that she moved to a different city, that she's in therapy. Good. I mean that. I genuinely hope she figures out whatever was going on with her. I just don't need to be part of it. The hockey league turned into a regular thing. I moved into a better apartment in the east end of the city. Bigger, better light. I adopted a dog. A big dumb, happy retriever mix from the shelter who thinks every single day is the best day of his life. And I cannot tell you how useful that energy is to have in your home. I've started going out more. I've been on a few dates, nothing serious, but the fact that I'm willing to try means something. The holidays last year were quiet. I had a Friendsmas thing with my crew from work. My best friend hosted a thing on Christmas Eve. And I went to my dad's on Boxing Day. Just the two of us and his dog, and some leftover turkey. It wasn't what my life used to look like at Christmas. But it was real. It was people who wanted me there. Because they wanted me there. Not because they needed me to show up, in order for the tableau to work. I'm not angry anymore. That's the thing I want to say about all of this. The thing that feels most true and maybe most useful if anyone's listening. The anger was real and it was justified and it ran its course. What's left is something quieter. Not forgiveness exactly. I don't think I owe anyone that on a timeline that doesn't belong to me. Just distance. Just the fact that I know who I am now in a way I didn't when I was embedded in all of that. I needed my family to have my back. They didn't. Some of them have tried to find their way back to me since, in different ways, with different success. I'm taking it slow. I'm not running toward anything. But I'm not running away anymore either. I'm just here. In my apartment, with my dog, with a life that is genuinely mine, and that turns out to be enough.